The Emu War. One of the most ridiculous military campaigns ever is called the Emu Wars, and as the name suggests, it was a war fought against emus. That's right, Australia went to war with the species of flightless bird, and if that's not bad enough, they actually lost. Emus might seem like a harmless symbol of Australia, but 1932 signalled an all-time low in the emu-human relationship. But it actually all started with World War I. The First World War was the deadliest conflict in Australian history. On top of the awful losses were the large number of veterans returning home with gruesome and debilitating wounds that prevented them from finding work. The response from the Australian government at the time really wasn't great, but after bowing to public condemnation, the government finally came up with a scheme that was supposedly going to help both veterans and feed the public. The countryside was to be divided up into plots, and veterans were encouraged to become farmers. Sadly though, this plan wasn't well thought out. The soil was awful. Vermin were a constant issue, and the veterans had little to no experience farming, and yet thousands of them took up the offer to grow crops like wheat and tried to make a go of it. But of course, they had forgotten to take into account the emus, and it turns out that 20,000 emus make for one big problem. Emus regularly migrate and head to the coast after breeding season, and on their way there, they found this new cultivated land was actually a pretty good habitat, so they kind of moved in. Problem was, they trampled the crops with their giant feet, and what they didn't trample, they ate. And when they broke in, they made huge holes in the fences, where rabbits and rats could easily enter, causing even more headaches. In other words, the emus were the enemy, and people decided to put a stop to their thieving ways. War was declared. The Emu War. Seemed like an easy win in theory, but they totally underestimated these clever birds. The government deployed the military, supplying them with machine guns and armoured vehicles and 10,000 rounds of ammunition, and so the battle began. The men opened fire, but they weren't ready for how fast emus could run, and those big birds were out of range before any were hit. You see, emus actually have a pretty great strategy for dealing with predators. Whenever the group senses danger, they scatter, breaking into small groups and running in different directions. And since they can run over 30 miles an hour, they just kept escaping the military's offensive. But the humans were not going to give up that easily. Next, they mounted their weapons on the trucks, intent on chasing the emus down. But that didn't work either. The emus were still too fast for the trucks, which couldn't navigate over the rough ground nearly as efficiently as the big birds. After multiple battles and tens of thousands of rounds of ammunition wasted, more than 19,000 emus still remained, and Australia had to admit defeat. The emus had beaten man in an epic victory that would be remembered for all time. Because the government had been so sure that they could win, they'd actually invited a camera crew to record the whole thing. So the entire epic battle was televised, and the whole world knew that Australia was beaten by a flock of flightless birds. And of course, when the world did find out, they condemned Australia for the awful treatment of the poor birds, and they came down on the side of the emus. So it really was an epic fail, no matter how you look at it.